role of the teacher be? Sometimes we think the teacher is the guide on the side. I think that's the new version. It used to be the sage on the stage. Really, the role of the teacher should be supporting changes in kids' thinking over time. Now, you may think, don't I do that, or don't all teachers do that? No. They don't change kids' thinking over time. They deliver lessons in serial fashion, but they don't find out what kids know and then purposely work on what kids know over time. So part of what has to happen in the classroom that you can actually see is that you want to, as a teacher, you want to support students not just in creating models and explanations, but revising those over time in response to evidence. You want teachers to create opportunities for everyday sense-making through talk. And then you also want to help students learn how to identify and manage resources. And by resources, I don't mean just information and materials. I also mean their own ideas. Those are resources. Science ideas are resources. Technology is a resource. And it sounds crazy to say this, but if you're a teacher over the course of the year, you want your students to be less and less dependent on you to identify which resources do you need to move your thinking forward. Your kids by mid-year should be able to say, okay, I've been helped to do this in the last few months, and now I think I can identify the resources I need on my own. So today is just a what's possible conversation. It's gonna maybe seem like drinking from a fire hose, but I wanna just put people at ease that I'm gonna show you work by people who have been doing this work for a number of years. And it's just we just wanna have talk today about what might we be able to do as a starting point. So we found that anchoring units of instruction is really helpful. And when I say a unit of instruction, what I mean is 2 to 4 weeks. Some teachers have units that are much smaller than 2 weeks. Others have units that are longer than 4 weeks. And I don't recommend that teachers teach some unit that's more than 4 weeks because you're likely teaching more than 1 or 2 really big science ideas. And kids will have a hard time pulling those together to make sense. So when I say a unit, it's 2 to 4 weeks. So here are different anchoring events from they're real. They're ones that I have either personally watched or I have artifacts from classrooms. So on the top left, sophomore biology, they're studying cell reproduction and cell function, cell structure. But again, not in the abstract. It's from the standpoint of the teacher and her aunt who just got word that she has breast cancer. And they don't know if it's spreading. And the teacher shared this with somebody and they said, let's study that when we study cells. And so that's the anchoring event at the sophomore level in a school in Seattle. There's a 5th grade class that I talked about earlier. How can a singer break a glass with just the sound from his voice? Kindergarten. I don't know how many people in here work with kindergarten or early elementary. How can somebody little push somebody big off the end of a playground slide? The kids are outside and there's a little teddy bear at the end of the slide. That's a real picture. If you actually try to come up with the explanation yourself for how that's possible, it's more complicated than you think. But kindergartners can at least approach an explanation for that. On the bottom left, 6th graders studying solar eclipses. In the bottom middle, AP Chemistry, students are studying where did that heat go? It was started off in the coffee urn, it went into my cup, and cup cooled up. Where did that heat go? And the bottom right, the 8th grade life science, why are killer whale populations in Puget Sound declining? If you look at all 6 of those, you might say, I see a couple real contrasts here. So down here I've got AP Chemistry students, and up here I've got kindergartners. Are both of them doing modeling and explanation that changes over the course of a unit? Yes. Up here you've got an anchoring event that is at the scale of the human cell, the DNA in a human cell. Below it, the solar eclipse, you have an anchoring event at the scale of the cosmos. So anchoring events don't have to be phenomenal. They can be very small. They can take place over long periods of time or very short periods of time. Here's how we define anchoring events because language is important. So anchoring events, it reflects a puzzling event or process whose full explanation requires a wide range of science ideas to be coordinated with one another and to be coordinated with evidence. So if you come up with a really great anchoring event, but it does not require a number of important science ideas to be understood and coordinated with one another, you probably should change the event or select a different one. So I've got some video examples, and I just want to say, by the way, we use different terms, so don't be confused. Sometimes I'll say anchoring phenomenon. Sometimes I'll say anchoring event, sometimes puzzling event, sometimes puzzling phenomena. I apologize for that confusion, but all of our teachers just use those. So this one is in India. This is a solar eclipse. People are gathered on the banks of the Ganges. In a 7th grade class, they're watching this video. It's shot by the BBC. It's absolutely fabulous. There's a kid who said, but they're all there already by the river. They know the eclipse is going to happen. How does that work? Is it predictable? And they debate in class about whether it's predictable or not. And the teacher says, that's a really good question. Let's use this unit. Not just what causes a solar eclipse, but why are they so predictable? And then another student brings up how rare they are. And the teacher said, boy, rare plus predictable, if we can figure out those two things, those are two really good questions. So sometimes your questions, well, every time, your question that you ask has to be as good as the anchoring event itself. Of course, if we study cells, as I just mentioned, we almost always study cancer. Some people have said, isn't that too controversial? Are you worried that your kids are too sensitive about studying something that probably afflicts someone they know in their family? And my experience is no. Kids appreciate understanding cancer. Some of your kids have it. Some relative has got it. They really appreciate it. They do not shy away from it. This is the glass shattering. This is something for sophomore level in high school. It's the wolves of Yellowstone. I'll explain more about it, but wolves got reintroduced to Yellowstone in the mid-1990s, and they changed the ecosystem. That's a super complex problem. And so, but we did address it in a number, and this is successful. This is an anchoring event that we have tried out multiple times. We know it works, it engages kids, and we know that there's a bunch of really important science ideas that have to be brought together. So we reuse this. This is the imploding tanker car. So some of you already know this because it's so famous. It has been used 1,000 times in the last 10 years. So this is here's a story. There's a railroad tanker car, and there's a couple guys on a crew, and they are putting steam jets inside the railroad tanker car, and they're cleaning the inside out. And they're not supposed to close the hatch, but they pull out the steam jets and immediately close and seal the hatch. So this next one is just a guy doing a backflip, running up to the wall. There's force, there's motion, there's unbalanced forces, there's static and dynamic friction. Here's ice cream and phase change. We are using this at the upper elementary level. In kindergarten and first grade, we use the role of pollinators. We have something called apples to apples, like we have a tree, and then a few years later, another tree appears about a mile away, and there's nothing else around, and we ask the kids, where did that other tree come from? What is the actual narrative behind that? And it's got something to do with a complex relationship between pollinators and the reproductive cycles of plants and seed germination and growth. This is our favorite. This is a guy. So here's a daredevil. You might have seen this video before. Daredevil, he goes out onto it looks like some open field with some friends, and he's got a lawn chair, and he's got like 100 helium balloons, and he blows them all up, and yeah, you know what happens. Look at this always kills me. Watch how high that goes. He's like over a mile high. Now he's got a GoPro camera on his helmet, but he also has a pellet gun. So that's him parachuting down. Somebody have a question about that? The fact that a good anchoring event has got to have multiple science ideas that kids are asked to draw together over time. So with a guy breaking the glass with just a sound from his voice, there are a lot of science ideas that kids have to understand, not just by themselves, but how they interrelate with one another. So there's sound transferring energy through liquids and solids. There's air as a medium of transmission. There's a propagation of sound waves in all directions at once. Here's a difficult one for even adults, sound as compression waves. What does that look like if you were able to see the unobservable? Conservation of energy, resonance is another difficult one, even for teachers to come to grips with before they start teaching this. And then all of these have to be linked by the kids to come up with an explanation. This is the case of the wolves in Yellowstone. So in 1995, wolves were reintroduced. In the mid-20s, they were eradicated. They were shot or transported out of the Yellowstone ecosystem. And then in 1995, they were reintroduced. But before they were introduced, the image on the left is a basic representation of the ecosystem. And you can see that there's only 4 or 5 identifiable things in the Yellowstone ecosystem. There's more than that, but it was an impoverished ecosystem, actually, in the mid-90s. Then about 20 years after wolves were brought in, the ecosystem looks like it does on the right, much more diverse. Now, how can you introduce an apex predator that eats nearly every other mammal in the system and make the system more diverse and rich? How is that possible? That is what's puzzling. In the Yellowstone scenario, kids have to understand population dynamics, the trophic levels of energy, carrying capacity, interdependence of organisms, niches or niches, however you pronounce that, competition for resources, and then all the interactions between them. So the reason I'm taking pains to show these slides in particular is some people say, oh, you're going to do anchoring events, or you're going to do some kind of reformed teaching. Well, where is the rigor? So I can tell you to do this work is far more rigorous than some of the things that I have seen teachers do. Memorizing the periodic table is difficult, but it's simply arbitrarily difficult. In this day and age, you've all got cell phones. Just look up the atomic weight for cadmium. Just look it up.